Hello friends and spiritual seekers. So this is Witchy Wednesday, and today this is going to be the third installment of the basics of witchcraft. So today we'll be going over the wheel of the year, so the festivals, manifestation and divination, and the types of witches in witchcraft. Just want to make a quick note that all of the dates that I'm going to be talking about is representative of the Northern Hemisphere. That's where I live. So first thing, we'll go over the Wheel of the Year. Now, first thing I need to say is you do not have to celebrate every date that's on the Wheel of the Year. I personally don't, and I never felt like I needed to. I usually just do the big ones, and most of the time I forget the other ones even exist, to be honest, until I, see things on Instagram, whatever, but you don't have to do it. There's no rules on that you have to celebrate them. Obviously, there's some bigger ones that are kind of the bigger celebrations that are more commonly celebrated, but it's all up to you. You don't have to celebrate any, you can celebrate them all, but there's just certain aspects of the cycle of the year that we want to bring attention to and celebrate. So most of the time, the first and the big celebration at the beginning of the year is Samhain. Also, another disclaimer that my pronunciation is going to be different from other people that you have seen / heard say these words. There's a reason for that. Everybody's from different cultures and backgrounds, and that also carries into different culture, like different linguistics. So even though I say it one way, people from other parts of the world or different backgrounds are going to say it differently. Both of us are right. All of us are right in how we say it. If that's how we've heard it, or that's how we interpret it based on our own language or language history, that's perfectly fine. Please don't shame people on how they pronounce these words. So anyway, for me, I celebrate Samhain as the New Year, or the Witch's New Year, which is probably the biggest one. That's the one you hear about the most. Again, different books and different calendars that you're going to see. It's going to change. The dates are going to change a little bit, but typically it's from October 31st to November 2nd. Most commonly, we celebrate it on November 31st. That's the most common. It's easy. It's the easiest, right? All Hallows Eve. It's just a kind of catch-all. We do it all usually on that day. So why does Samhain represent the new year? Because that's when the cycle starts to restart. Our harvest and everything from this last year or last harvest season is already done. We did all of our harvest in September and October. That's all done, and now we're kind of getting ready for the winter. So we're kind of in this nice in-between space where we're done all the hard work of harvesting and we're already ready to go for the winter, but winter isn't quite here yet. So we kind of have this rest period, this party time, before the hardships and the hard work of winter starts to come. So there are big feasts related to this time of year. Think of Thanksgiving. So there's a reason, because we've harvested everything. We've got these big stockpiles of food. Animals are, we've reared them up until this time of the year, and it's time to, eat the fruits of our labor. Time to feast. A lot of times this time of year is representative of like apples and gourds and brews and all that kind of stuff, because it's ready now, right? We've been waiting all summer. It's ready now. So we're going to eat all of those up. Samhain also aligns with the time of year which is typically associated with the thinning of the planes between our world and the spirit world. So a lot of ancestry rituals and Days of the Dead and that kind of stuff also happens around this time of year. So not to call on any particular culture or ritual, there's many around the world that happen around this time of year that are representative of connecting with the dead during this time. So that's usually a big part of this, time of the year as well. So next we have Yule. Now, depending on what book you read, the year actually starts with Yule, but it kind of just depends on what book you read. So, that's up to you and how you want to start that. This also coincides with the winter solstice. So it happens around December 20th to 23rd, kind of changes every year because it coincides with the solstice. Now, Yule or Yuletide is usually a celebration of the change of the sun. So this is going to be the winter solstice. It is the longest night of the year. So we're going to be celebrating the return of the sun, because the sun is the farthest away from the earth, and this is when it's going to start making its return to the earth. The god kind of representation is associated with the sun. So a lot of times there's God, you know, the horned god kind of rituals around this time, because as the sun returns, so is the horned god. This is where our kind of like trees with lights or a Yule log or a big bonfire is started with. So the idea is that you light the way for the sun to return, because it's so far in darkness. You're lighting its way and you're celebrating its return of the light. Next we have Imbolc or Candlemas. I've seen it a few different, there's also more names for it, but those are the most common. And this is on February 2nd. So Imbolc represents kind of the beginning of spring. We're not quite in spring yet, but things are starting to shift. So big things that are happening around this time of year is calving, and you know, all the baby animals are starting to come. So we're having that new life starting around this time. All the plants are coming back, but we typically have, you know, the baby livestock beforehand. So new life is starting to come. Spring is starting to come. Next we have Ostara, and this coincides with the spring equinox. So again, the dates are a little bit shifty. This is around March 20th to the 23rd. Again, depends on the year. So Ostara, this is our celebration of the return of spring. Spring is in full bloom, at least in most parts of the world or northern hemisphere during March. I live very high north, so I mean, I don't really get spring until about April, but the seeds, the sun is already coming back during that kind of like good time in March, kind of end of March. This is a big celebration about fertility. So there's actually old folklore about the eggs and the bunny and the fertility of all that kind of stuff. Well, that's kind of, you know, if you think of Easter, there is very old traditional pagan rituals and celebrations related to that. And the main theme is about fertility and just fertility of the earth. All the plants are going to be coming back. Animals are, you know, babies are being born around this time. Some animals are just starting to, you know, become fertile and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a big rebirth of the earth happening during that time. Next we have is Beltane or May Eve. Again, it's got multiple names, and this one happens around April 30th or May 1st. Beltane is representative of the full union between the god and goddess moving into summer. So they have joined together in complete unison in all aspects of nature. So all of that love and fertility and regrowth is in full bloom at this time. This is where it's really starting to kick off. So next we have is Litha or Midsummer. This coincides with the summer solstice. So again, the dates will fluctuate between approximately June 20th to 23rd, again, depending on the year. So Midsummer, this is one of our bigger celebrations because this is the peak of the sun. This is the peak of summer and the god's life and Mother Nature's kind of growth during this time. And we're just in full bloom of our harvest and our plants, our regrowth of the earth. And like we feel like in summer, normally we are reborn. We're full of energy. The days are long and warm and we can do things outside and do many activities and visit people and visit places. And it's just that kind of regrowth of our spirits and just of our energy in the earth overall. Next we have is Lammas or August Eve. Again, there's more names, multiple names for this. And this one typically happens around August 1st. So this is when our year is starting to wind down. The summer is starting to wind down. I mean, we're still kind of in the heat of August, but it's starting to wind down. Your early crops can be coming in during this time. Some places they can do double crops in a year. So this is usually when your first crops are starting to come out. Different root vegetables and fruits and berries and all that kind of stuff is usually starting to become really ripe at this time. So that's kind of our beginning, our harvest, beginning, starting to wind down into the fall. Next we have is Mabon or the fall equinox. And this is usually around September 20th to the 23rd. And Mabon is representative of our big full harvest. This is our big harvest before winter. So usually all crops are being pulled up during this time. Another thing that's happening around this year is hunting. This is usually around hunting season happens. Late September into October. So a lot of times we're going to be doing and hunting and gathering meat for the winter and curing meat and treating furs and all that kind of stuff in preparation for the winter. So this is a busy time of year overall, because this is our big harvest. And that would bring us right back around into Samhain, and then we're going to keep going again. So the circle of the year represents the cycle of the earth. And so if you just think of the seasons, that's the most basic form, right? We have, now we're going to start off with kind of like winter, spring, summer, and then fall. But we're going to coincide some of the spiritual aspects to that, because the sun is representative of the god, and the goddess is the earth. So that kind of cycle of the sun and the earth dancing together, there's a lot of spiritual aspects related to that. The life and death of animals, the life and death of plants and fruits and crops all coincide with those two entities dancing together. So I'm dumb and I forgot to empty out my memory card, and I don't have another one here right now, and it's late. I don't want to be doing too much messing around. So I'm just going to record the rest of this video on my phone. So please, I apologize for the abrupt change in background and angle. So next we're going to go over manifestation and divination. So kind of a little conversation about what is manifestation. What does manifestation mean to you? Now, if I answer 100 different people and 100 different witches and whatever, I'm going to come up with 100 different answers, because it means something a little bit different to every person. And what you need to kind of remember is manifestation isn't just, okay, I want a new car. I want a spell. I want a ritual. I want whatever, and I'm going to get this new car. Well, yes and no. It's not, it's not supernatural, right? Like, it's not going to just make shit appear. Like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So manifestation is just kind of bringing yourself into a better place in your life, or into a better aspect of your life that you need to work on or that you want to achieve. Okay? So using the aspect of a new car. Okay? So I want a new car. My car's a beater. I want a new car. Well, why do you not have a new car now? That's what you really have to think about. Why do you not have a new car now? Then you can deconstruct what you actually need to do, or what you actually need to manifest to get the end result of the car. Okay? So for an example, it's, okay, I don't have a new car because I don't have enough money. That's usually the reason, right? I don't have enough money. Okay, how come you don't have enough money? I don't work enough, I don't have enough hours at my job, so I don't make enough, right? Okay, well, how can we change that? Is there a different aspect that you can do at your current job? Can you get a second job? Can you get a new job, right? Like, you need to start like deconstructing. So if you come out with the realization of like, okay, I need a new job, right? Like, flat out, I need a completely new job. That's what you need to manifest. You need to work on manifesting the new job, or the new flow of income or wealth, to get the end result of the new car. So whatever you're trying to achieve, you need to deconstruct it into step-by-step process, right? You need to get to like smaller steps. So if I get this, then this will happen, blah, 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 get to the end result, right? Also, you need to make a note, or I need to make a note, that manifestation isn't always, you're going to get what you want. You're going to get what you need. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. And I've got a few examples of this, right? So a lot of people are looking for money, right? That's a big one for people, especially starting out. You want to try it out, right? You want to try it out if that, looking for money. So here's an example. I was doing a bunch of wealth spells, some candle spells, some spell jars. I mean, just wealth related spells to try to manifest more money. And I'm thinking money in the bank, right? My bank account number going up. That's what I wanted. Well, I've been doing it for a while. Nothing is really happening. I'm trying to open up channels to gain that wealth, right? You can't just, it's not going to come out of thin air. You have to open up physical channels for it to happen. So I'm doing that. Nothing's kind of really happening, and I kind of forget about it. Well, probably around like 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from the lawyer from my mom's estate that I thought was dealt with a couple years ago. And I had a bill that I was kind of ignoring because I didn't have the money to pay it. But I knew it was there. I knew I had to eventually deal with it. So I get a phone call from the lawyer, And I'm like, you know what? I just got to man up, pull on my big girl panties. I need to call them and like I need to talk to them and deal with this kind of thing, right? I answer it, and it's actually his assistant, which is the person I talk to the most, telling me that he's going to waive my bill. And this is like an over $3,000 bill from this lawyer. So, I mean, obviously that's like crazy that I had this bill for like 2 years and they're going to waive it magically. So did I gain money in the account? No, but I lost debt. That debt went away. So my overall wealth did go up quite significantly, actually. So it's not always, you need to keep yourself open to what is actually going to come to you. It's not going to be like, I want this. It's not necessarily going to happen exactly like that. Having more vague manifestation ideas, or having your very specific ones be small steps. You're not going to magically make big steps happen. Small steps will be achievable through manifestation. And I mean, yes, a lot of small steps will equal to a big step, but that takes time and it takes a lot of work. For big stuff, more general types of manifestation, or putting out the intentions of more of a general stuff, you can be very surprised on how that actually comes back to you, how it actually will manifest in your life. It's not always what you ask for. So just keep that in mind, that if you keep your mind open, you will open up those channels and you will get what you want. It just might not be the way you thought it was going to be. So next topic is going to be divination. Now, divination is just an umbrella term for seeking knowledge through supernatural means. And there are probably thousands, but I know for sure hundreds of ways that people do this. Now, there's obviously common ones that are the most common that you're going to see, but any way, any form or tool, or just using your mind, if you're trying to gain knowledge of the future or of an aspect that you cannot know the answer to logically, you're using some kind of supernatural means to gain that information, you are doing divination. Now, probably the most common way you're going to see divination is through tarot. Now, I am a tarot reader. I have a million decks. Not that that makes me a tarot reader, but I do tarot readings professionally, and it can be a great tool. It does take time to master, and it takes a lot of practice. Here's just an example of another deck that I have that I'm using in my tarot series right now. That's why they're out. And not everyone reads tarot the same. There's no one way of reading tarot. So yes, the books that come with your decks, and you know, the beginner tarot books and videos online and all that kind of stuff, yes, there is value in that when you're first starting out. I personally read intuitively. So yes, I read the books, I watched the videos, etc., etc. And as I was trying to get myself acquainted with the decks, that was very helpful. But I found through practice that me reading intuitively worked a lot better. Now that's just for me personally. So you kind of just have to learn your own style. And at the end of the day, you might not be able to read tarot. It might just not work for you, and that's perfectly fine. Another form is oracle decks. This is another very common style of divination. Oracle decks are very similar to tarot, just they are very straightforward, right? It gives you the meaning right there. Typically it'll come with a book that has like a more in-depth interpretation of the cards. And the little bit of a downside of the oracle cards is a lot of times they're just geared to one aspect. So like this is a love oracle card. There's the chakra oracle card. I'm looking at my decks. They're behind the camera there. I have like a Wicca oracle card. Like they're usually just for like one category, whereas tarot is, you can ask them anything. It depends on what kind of question you want answered. Next is the crystal ball. Now this is a glass ball. I do not have a proper crystal ball because they are expensive as hell, but glass is very common as well. I personally don't do divination with my crystal ball. I use it for energy disbursement. I talked about that a little bit in my first part of this series on what I use my crystal ball for, but crystal balls are used for divination as well. Another very common tool that you're going to see or may have already seen is a pendulum. This is one of my pendulums I made. I did it like at a workshop thing, so it has like a rose quartz kind of point, and it's got some crystals on the handle. This is cool, but I don't really like the pendulum. It doesn't work for me. It just doesn't. And I know it works for a lot of people. The lady who I did the workshop with, I fully believe her that pendulum does work for her. She does them a lot, right? She does a lot of readings with them, and she does a lot of readings with crystals. I fully believe her. It just doesn't work for me. Same as how reading tarot for her doesn't quite work. So just because it doesn't work for you doesn't mean it's bullshit. It just doesn't work for you. That's fine. Other forms of divination tools, there's lots. You can use flames, you can use crystals, dice, cards, like pack of regular cards, using charms, bones, sand, like seashells. People use that. If you just search divination online, you'll come up with a plethora of things. It's more of just finding a style that works for you. If you want to, you do not have to do divination as a witch. It's not a, prerequisite to being a witch is you need to use divination. It's kind of an extra tool for witches. It's not part of the curriculum. It's not part of the core beliefs. It's just kind of an extra thing that a lot of witches do because we're into the supernatural stuff. That's the whole point of doing this, right? It's very common in witchcraft, but it's not required. Last part of this video is going to be the types of witches and witchcraft. So the types of witchcraft or witches can be endless. I'm finding, and I'm not to make any offense to people with, different genders, but I'm finding that the types of witches is being very reminiscent of how there's more genders just magically appearing all the time. You can't keep up to it. You can't know it all. It's just it's just starting to become this wave that is growing and uncontrollably. So that's what I'm just going to say about that. But there are some common ones, right, that you'll kind of see recurrently. So the common ones I'm going to kind of go over is green witch. So this is, or some people like a garden witch. I don't know if they're separate. They kind of seem the same to me. And these are people who are very drawn to nature and plants and gardening, and they're green, right? They have green thumbs and they love plants and nature, and that's their thing. Next is sea witch. So just like the green witch is all about nature, sea witches are all about the water and seashells and the motion of the sea, and any kind of like water related practice. Next is the kitchen witch. This was a lot more common back in the day, for sure, because people had to work in their kitchens. They had to hide and be secretive. So a lot of times it happened in the kitchen with kitchen tools to not be as suspicious. So these are typically witches who are solitary most of the time, and they use kitchen tools and they do things related to the kitchen. So a lot of cooking, cleaning, protection type spells, and that kind of nature. Next one is cosmic witch. So these are typically witches that are more drawn to like astrological signs and astrological readings, and following the astrological cycles, which if I see something online about like Mercury retrograde, it's like, okay, cool, like, yeah, good to know, that's why I'm being a bitch today or whatever. But it's not something I follow. Some people like really follow them. So I mean, that's their thing, right? That's what they follow. So that is kind of its own category. Next is elemental witch. So these are witches that typically deal with either one element or all of the elements, but that's their main focus of their practice, is using elemental power. Some use only one, like they're very focused on one, but some use all four. But that's kind of like their basis of their practice is the elemental power. Next is the eclectic witch, which I'm finding in modern times is kind of the most common, because a lot of times we practice a little bit of everything or a little bit of multiple categories. So that's, you can't really fit into one category because you kind of practice everything. You don't really have a basis. Even if you are, you self-identify as a green witch, for example, it doesn't mean you can't do any water magic or do any cosmic, astrological stuff or whatever. It just means that your main part of your practice is based in nature, based in, the green witch stuff. But eclectic witches typically don't have a base. They don't have a base. It's just kind of you know, they do a little bit of everything. Next is a hereditary witch. Now, hereditary witches are people who are born and raised in a particular tradition or a particular type of witchcraft or family traditions. It's hereditary. They've grown up with that style of witchcraft that they do. And that's very special because that is, you know, specific to their family and their culture on how they practice. Next is a traditional witch. So as far as my understanding is of traditional witches or witchcraft, is it is rooted in very, very old practices. So stuff that has kind of happened in like modern times. So like oracle cards and things like that, crystals. They don't really draw to them too much because that's more of a modern thing. That's not something they practiced in the 1500s, 1300s, etc. That wasn't a thing then, right? So my understanding is traditional witchcraft is like rooted in very old traditions. Next is the hedge witch. So my understanding is that hedge witches, they like to cross the plane. So that hedge is between our kind of physical plane and the astrological plane. So they like to travel back and forth. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do in that process. I don't know, because I don't really practice that too much outside of like doing Reiki and things of that kind of nature. So I don't know if there's specific things that why they like to cross. I think it's more of just like a connection with this, with the spiritual side of this, spirit world and the astral plane and things like that. So they go back and forth. As far as like specific rituals and things, I'm not too familiar on, but I'm assuming you can research that if you're looking more into that kind of category. Next is religious witchcraft. This is kind of an interesting category to me because this is where they practice witchcraft, but they also practice a more common tradition. Usually you see like a Christian witch. This is the most common that I've seen. There may be people from other religions obviously that do both, but the Christian witch is kind of the most common. So my understanding is they believe in the Christian God as far as like the deity side of worship, but they also believe in cycles of nature and the cycle of the year and the sun and that kind of stuff, but they don't have deities or any kind of like god or goddess powers attached to that. They have their Christian God as far as their deity. And the last one I'm going to talk about or just touch on, which is usually the least common one you hear about, and that is actually a death witch. The reason I bring it up is because I self-identify as kind of an eclectic death witch. And the reason I say it that way is because even though the main part of my practice and my spirituality as far as like my connection is kind of death witch related, and it is also hereditary for me. And the reason I don't say I'm a hereditary witch is because it wasn't actually practiced. It wasn't, I wasn't taught how to do things or anything like that. It was just kind of this thing we did. Like it was whatever, and nobody really talked about it. There wasn't anything special about it, which is kind of nice, but like at the same time, it's like I wasn't really taught how to control it or anything like that. So I mean, there was obviously a downside. So my main practice is death witch stuff. But I say I'm eclectic because I do a lot of other stuff too. I would say it's about a 50-50. 50 death stuff, 50% everything else, if that makes sense. So that's why I say it that way. As far as death witch stuff. So being a death witch, you're obviously connect with a lot of death related practices and spirituality. And a lot of times you're sitting at that edge between life and death. Not me personally, but you're kind of in that spiritual plane where you're seeing different spirits and people and entities and all that kind of stuff crossing that border, right? And you can cross that border to kind of connect with people and see the spirits and things like that. I talked about this on my TikTok. I have a bunch of videos on my TikTok about that. If you want a full YouTube video about it, I will. But you can always just jump on my TikTok and see those videos. So that's kind of like the least known category. It's not scary. It's not, like we're praying for people to be dead or anything of that nature. That is absolutely nothing related to what we do at all. But, misconceptions and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so this is the last part of the kind of like basics to witchcraft. I think I'm going to do a part 4 that's just going to touch a little bit on like starting spell work and how to do it in a safe way, doing astral projection, but in a safe way, like you're not gonna astral project to like beyond the universe of recognition. It's just more of like getting yourself, your spiritual self, out of your physical body. That's what I see as, moving into the astral plane. Just getting yourself out of your physical body. Most of the time when I like astral project, I'm usually still on Earth. That I don't go very far. You know what I mean? I don't want to go very far from my body. So that's what I'll kind of talk about, is just doing that in a safe manner and how to recognize when you're kind of like getting a little too far kind of thing. So that will be in part 4 next week. And thanks for joining me. Sorry about the change of angle and camera. It is what it is. And thanks guys. I hope you learned something today.